I tell you what, I would hate to be a bike designer. It doesn't matter what you do, people are either going to tell you that your bike looks like a Trek, or they're going to tell you that it's the ugliest thing that they've ever seen. Either way, people, it is not a modelling contest, it's mountain biking, and this particular calamity of carbon happens to be very good at that. It's fast, it's funky, and there are some things that it does very, very well in particular. Okay, let's tick off a few of the fundamentals first. 27.5-inch wheels, 150mm of travel at both ends. You can get two models of this bike here in Australia. This is the Mountain Vision 9, comes in at 6,799, or there is the Mountain Vision 8, which comes in at 5,499. Both of them share exactly the same full carbon frame. You just get a few less glamorous bits and pieces on the cheaper bike. If you're looking at the shape of this bike and thinking it's a little bit familiar, you'd be correct. This is the second bike from Marin to use the nailed React 2-play suspension system. The other one being the Marin Wolf Ridge, which on paper is a bigger bike with 160mm of travel and 29-inch wheels, but in fact is more of a trail bike and better suited to long days in the saddle. But while this Mount Vision is shorter travel than the Wolf Ridge, it is actually better equipped for hard riding. It is stiffer, it changes direction faster, it is more responsive, and is just all round better suited to someone who likes to ride a bit more aggressively. But a little bit more about that suspension. It is obviously very different to everything else on the market. Just take a look at it. That massive swing arm is supported by two sets of linkages and a swing link driving the shock. There is also a slider that is housed down near the bottom bracket junction. Now this slider doesn't play any role in the damping of the suspension at all. It is purely a structural member and also helps guide the wheel path in conjunction with the two linkages. The whole ethos around damping is different with this bike too. The basic premise is that damping robs energy from the bike and stops the suspension from working optimally. And so before I hit the trails on this bike, I wound all the compression damping out of the rear shock and ran just 4 clicks. That's 3, and ran just 4 clicks of rebound, which is far less than I would normally run. I wasn't particularly fussy with the sag measurement either. I got it in that 25 to 30% ballpark and just left it there. Now with a lot of other bikes, if you had this lackadaisical kind of approach, there would be all kinds of disastrous outcomes on the trails. You'd probably go flying over the bars. But on the Mountain Vision, it just bloody works. The rear wheel follows the ground incredibly well. And if the idea of a suspension system is to keep your tyres in contact with the dirt, well then you can't beat this bike. There is just so much rear wheel grip with this bike, and that comes into play when you're climbing, when you're cornering, all kinds of scenarios. The frame is very stiff too, which means that you can take advantage of that rear wheel grip too. Now on the subject of climbing, if you stay on the gas you will be blown away by how efficient this bike is. There's no lockout or anything like that, and the suspension is unrestricted, so all those little bumps that you encounter on a loose climb that would normally either cause your wheel to spin or cause you to hang up a little bit and lose momentum, those are just ironed out, and so you feel like you really do sail up those rough climbs. Unfortunately, there's no hiding the fact that by the time you've added pedals and a water bottle, this bike is going to be up over 16 kilograms, which is pretty heavy. And it doesn't matter how well a bike pedals, that's still a lot of heft to get back up the hills. The other thing you might notice with this bike when you're out of the saddle climbing is that there's a fair bit of chain tug. As that rear wheel encounters impacts, you'll feel that chain pulling back against your crankset. It's no deal breaker, but it is something that you will notice more than other bikes. It's also incredibly good at pumping speed out of the terrain. Because the rear wheel just follows the ground so closely, it manages to follow down the backside all those little impacts, and so it's quite easy to then exert force through that rear wheel and milk speed out of those downslopes on the back of every impact that on other bikes you would simply skim across. Because the rear suspension is so unique and runs with so little damping, I tried to match that feel with the fork too to keep the bike reasonably balanced. I ran the fork rebound a little bit faster than normal, and I backed off both the high and low speed compression damping on the fork entirely. If we have a criticism of this bike, it's that slow speed handling tends to feel a little bit unstable. Because there's no real rebound or compression dampening going on in any meaningful sense out back, on those slower, awkward moments like when you're trying to slot into a tight, slow speed chute or line up a tight, descending switchback, the whole bike has a slightly unsettled and hyperactive feel about it. And I think it's fair to say that this is a bike that is way happier when you are moving quickly. When you're moving fast, that open and free feeling of the suspension really comes into its own, whereas when you're trying to do more precise slow speed maneuvers, it can just feel a little bit bouncy. If you can't get past this bike's looks, then you are missing out, and that is a real shame. This is one of those bikes, much like the Polygon Square one that we've tested before, that it's really quite hard to convey in words exactly what it does and how it does it so well, without being able to offer someone a test ride on it. And that is a challenge for the distributor too. Bicycles Online are a direct-to-the-consumer brand, and they sell their bikes entirely through their website. That said, they do offer a 14-day test ride period if you buy the bike, so you can try it out relatively risk-free. We're eager to see if more brands are going to jump on board with the nailed React two-play suspension system in years to come, and we really hope they do, because the Marin Mount Vision 9 has clearly showed us that if you take that suspension system, package it up with a stiff frame with good geometry and a sensible component package, then you have a real weapon on your hands.